Hello, everyone, and welcome to AP US History for Winners with your teacher, Mr. Johnson. Last time we talked about the New South, and today we are talking about technological innovations. So, if you are ready, let's begin. So, we're going to begin thinking about technological advancements during something called the Gilded Age, which is the time period from about 1880 to 1900. Gilded Age, this might be a new term for you. What I want you to think of when you think of Gilded Age is that it's covered in a thin layer of gold, and on the inside, it's not as pretty. So, things on the outside are looking good and on the inside, there's some issues, okay? But we're going to talk today about some technological advances during this time period. Again, the Gilded Age is that time period, 1880 to 1900. Now, a lot of this has to do with industrialization. Now, before industrialization, Americans made things by hand and they sold them locally. They sold them to people near them, okay? But as people began to industrialize and create things through machines, people were mass producing things and their items are going to be sold all over the world. Now, how does that actually end up happening? And we're going to kind of go through some technological advancements here. And in the next slide, we'll talk about some causes of all this. But the biggest technological advancement, the most important one, is going to be the railroad. Okay, so make sure you have that in your head. So the railroad is a quick and easy way to transport goods over long distances. Now, we've talked about them before, but they're going to be built more and more in this time period. So they're going to become more and more important. They're going to lead to mass production. So we're going to produce more things because of the railroad. And we're also going to see mass consumption. People are going to be able to consume and buy more things because of the railroad. And how did more railroads get built is because of the federal government. So the federal government realizes how strong and how important railroads are. And they're going to subsidize them, meaning they're going to give money to railroad companies and they're going to give land to railroad companies, okay, called land grants. And they actually end up giving about 170 million acres of land for this. And in this time period, we see 4 new transcontinental railroads being built throughout the United States. Now, there's a total of 5 railroads that connect the east to the west. And so now, with 5 railroads connecting the east to the west, we see that the west gets a bunch of benefits out of this. And the west is now truly connected to the rest of the country. Okay. Now, a lot of these new technologies are going to allow for rapid and efficient manufacturing, meaning we're going to see people producing more and more items in an easier and easier way. And one idea behind this, it's not like an invention, but it's an idea, is called scientific management. And it's created by this guy on the right, Frederick Taylor, or, and sometimes you hear it called Taylorism. And he comes with this idea for factory workers that's going to improve their efficiency, and is going to have timed tasks where workers are basically given specific tasks and they're asked to do these tasks in a timed manner to increase their productivity. And it's very effective. And we'll see this as we continue on throughout the Industrial Revolution. We'll see things like assembly lines that kind of all fit in with this idea as well. Okay. Some other inventions that get created are like mechanized tractors. So now we don't need to use horses to pull our tractors. Now we have, machines and engines. A grain elevator, so we can move grain into silos, again, by machine instead of by hand, going to increase productivity. And railroads, especially in the West, I'm mentioning it again because it's super important. The railroads are going to connect the West, and they're going to allow the East and the West to be connected and allow a lot of the resources from the West to get out to the East. Another advancement that maybe you haven't heard of before, but is important, is called the Bessemer process. And this is a way to make steel and to make a lot of very strong steel. So this guy, the last name of Bessemer, creates this idea where basically you push air through iron and it makes better steel. I don't really know how it makes a better steel, but it does. But this is going to make more steel. It's going to make better steel. And this is going to allow, again, if we have better steel, now we have bigger buildings, now we have better machines. All that stuff kind of works together. All right, the last 2 inventions, which inventions you've probably heard of before, but are very important. One is the telegraph. Now, this is invented well before our time period in 1844. It's invented by a guy named Samuel Morse. That's where we get Morse code from. But it's really expanded in the late 1800s. In fact, they laid a transatlantic cable so that America could communicate with Europe. And we're going to see the expansion of communication systems with the telegraph. So we're going to be a lot more telegraph lines. And this is going to help businesses coordinate the access that they have to resources, especially in like remote areas, because they're going to be able to communicate and figure out when they need more resources and what's the status of everything. And then last is the telephone, invented in 1876 by Alexander Graham Bell. Now, it's going to have very similar effects as the telegraph, but as we know, the telephone is going to take over eventually. And in fact, 4 years after it's invented, there's actually 50,000 telephones in America. So you can see, again, these new communication devices are increasing productivity. They're increasing communication. It's going to make it a lot easier for businesses to do their work. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the causes of the increased production of goods by businesses. So, why are businesses able to produce so many more goods? And one of the biggest reasons is the greater access to natural resources. Okay, so especially when we think about out west, there's a ton of lumber out west. We've already talked about how there's gold, and there's tons of resources out west. And the railroads are going to allow them the rest of the country to access these resources. There's also coal everywhere, especially like in Pennsylvania and West Virginia. Coal is the first major energy source for the Industrial Revolution in this time period. They're going to burn coal on their railroads and their factories and everywhere to create this energy. Okay, so this greater access to natural resources really pushes the increased production. Okay. There's some other ideas here too, though. Redesigned financial and management structures. So businesses get redesigned in how they can be created, and we start to think very big. And that's why sometimes it's called the Gilded Age, because businesses, especially the large ones, grow very, very big, and we start to see monopolies. And monopolies are businesses that want to have their entire control over one industry. So, like if you could only buy coffee from Starbucks, Starbucks would have a monopoly. So in the late 1800s in the Gilded Age, we're thinking about things like Standard Oil, which are creating monopolies. Andrew Carnegie is another example of this. John D. Rockefeller. These are some people who create these monopolies and redesign these financial and management structures. We're going to see some marketing advances as well, especially like you see on the right, like the mail order catalogs become very popular. Sears, I'm sure you've heard of Sears, is a company that popularizes these, and they mail these out, and people can shop at home, order what they want, and can get mailed to them. So that advancement in marketing becomes very important. And then last is the growing labor force. We start to see more and more workers coming into America, either people moving to where the jobs are into the cities, or we start to see a lot of immigrants coming to America as well to fill in these jobs. And at this time, there's no regulations as far as how much you need to pay people or anything like that. So it creates for a lot more workers is going to lead to more productivity, basically. Okay. All right, so that is actually it for our notes on technological innovation. They were short, but there's a lot of little details in there, a lot of interventions and some people's names that you need to be aware of. So let's take a look at our big ideas. Number one, describe a Gilded Age invention and its impact. Number two, describe the connection between natural resources and new inventions. And number three, describe the connection between expansion and new inventions. So thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time.